Hello, everyone. I hope you all are having a great Friday. I am Jordan Gilliard, a fourth year business administration student attending Florida A&M University, and I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I am a Reach Associate. I'm just going to give a brief introduction before I hand it over to Mr. Aldo. Um, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask as well. So, what is Reach? Reach is an organization for startups by startups. And we focus on creating network connections and implementing resources to help you build your brand. And Reach stands for Research, Entrepreneurship, and Commercialization Hub. So, I know some of you all may be wondering what type of events do we have? We have skill trainings, which focus on actionable skills for entrepreneur students, design sprints, which is a user experience event, and build days, which is all about pitching and making ideas come to fruition. And we will be releasing a entrepreneurial toolkit soon that'll be on the website, and I will put that in the chat now as well as Instagram. So please feel free to follow, ask any questions, and I'll hand it over to Aldo now.
Hi everyone, how are you? I hope you are good. I'm very glad that I'm here with you tonight. It's almost midnight for me, so good morning, I guess, there, midday kind of. So first of all, I want to start talking a little bit about me, to introduce myself, what I do, so you understand the experience that I have. And well, what I'm going to teach you, why it's useful in your path as UX and UI designers. First of all, I am Mexican originally, but now I live in Israel, in Tel Aviv. I work for a startup as UX UI designer. I've been working there already for 2 years. And as many people that started in UX UI, I switched career from graphic design. I'm originally a graphic designer. And well, along the way, I learned a bunch of stuff that is more useful for UX and UI. So first of all, um, this is going to be divided into parts: wireframing and prototyping. If you saw the banner that they very nicely designed. Today we're going to talk about wireframing. So what I wanted to talk about is, first of all, what is wireframing? Because maybe it's not that obvious. Wireframing originally is a concept made for rendering in architecture. For example, when they had to make a building, the design of a building, they made a kind of like a wireframe. They build the thing actually in a small scale, so they will be able to see how it will look like. So they took this concept from here to product design, to have a structure. This is basically what wireframing is using very simple stuff just to give the structure, have a general idea of how the product will look. This doesn't imply having animations, not having many colors. Usually it's recommended to have, a, of course, one color and maybe another one for like a gray, basically a black, like for the text, and maybe not necessarily, but some people like to use an other contrast colors for the CTA. CTA is short for call to action. We're going to talk a little bit about what is this if you don't know. Okay, so let's jump into Figma. I'm going to share my screen. And what we have here already is, when you open Figma, is what I have here. You will have your projects already, things that you already created, if you already started working. But out of the box, Figma has a few things. And one of those things is this, wireframing in Figma. What this has, if you open it, is basically a small introduction of what it is. They recommend you some other information if you want to dig more into it. but has something very useful that I really recommend that you check it out. That is some pre-made stuff by the designers in Figma. As you can see here, that you using three colors is the white that is working as a background, the gray that is working to display the elements, and they have also this blue specifically for certain call to actions like the display button in the media, like for a video, for example, or call to actions that go to another page or submit forms, for example. This is very useful because um, this can be used for rapid prototyping. Let's say in this case it will be wireframing. You already have a set of things that are already pre-made. Sometimes as designers we don't want to get creative and do everything from scratch, but when you are in the working environment you don't really have the time every time to start from scratch. So it's okay to take a few pre-made stuff and start working from there, and then start developing your concept or your idea. Okay, so I really recommend you to check this out. It's very useful, and also will give you a general panorama of all the things you can do while wireframing. For example, main menus. You can use, for example, boxes for videos, image holders, because for example in wireframing what we really use is we don't put the actual picture, we put something image placeholder. It's this thing right here, the one with the X cross here. It's just to say it's going to be a picture in here. We don't have to put the picture, we don't have to look into stock images, or we don't have to waste time in that. Okay, so basically wireframing is used for, there are many uses for it, but I like to put them, to simplify them in two. What we use them for is, first of all, to build structures, to have the idea of a flow. What is a flow? Let's say if I have a basic website, I will have the home, and then from the home I want people to navigate into another one. If you see here in Figma you have another one that is called navigation. That means it's a menu to navigate through a web page, this one. So one of the useful things you can do with the wireframing is have the flow without actually building all these pages. Let's say I want to build an online store. I can start with a home page, and from there, what is the next screen? Maybe it would be selecting the category of products, and then choosing specific product, and then choosing specific, I don't know, if it's, I'm buying t-shirts, then I can wireframe how I can do specific things for these t-shirts, like the colors, the sizes, things like this, and then a payway. If I pay through PayPal, if I need to input my credit card, and then so and so, what is going to happen in the process. This is what is basically the user experience, because it's what the user is going to experience in my digital product. Okay, let's understand first of all why it's a digital product, because sometimes we limit ourselves that a digital product is a website or is an app in our phones, but there are many other things. For example, smart TVs. For example, I even saw already there's a fridge with a small screen, and they'll tell you the temperature and which kind of shapes you want in your eyes. These kind of things, that is called the Internet of the Things. It means that all these appliances are connected into the internet to do something, or to give you some information, or for you to submit certain information. They need user experience, and they need a user interface, because the user needs to interact with these things. And we will see this more and more and more and more every time. Okay, so going back to wireframing, one of the things you do is this flow, the user experience of what happens up next, what's the next step the user needs to complete. And the other thing is there's something called A/B testing. What this means is if I have an idea I want to show, but I'm not really sure how to show it. For example, I have a landing page for a product, and I'm not really sure what will be more attractive for the clients I want to show this product to. So maybe it would be to show a gallery, or maybe it would be a video showing how to use the product. So if I'm not really sure, I can make both ideas, put it outside to test. This has more complexity because it can be through interviews, it can be through certain services like Hotjar, or it can be many ways. I'm not going to dig into it because it's very bad to talk about it. But if I want to do an A/B testing, then I build two different structures of the same product page, for example, and then I have a general idea of what I want to display, the information I want to display, and what are the differences between one and another, an A and a B. And then I can show it and use this wireframing to start building a prototype that then I will show and then I will test. This is basically the regular process um, for testing a product. And as designers, we do this all the time. We have the basic wireframe and we start adding up things. This is called prototyping, and there are levels of detail. Is called a fidelity. So when you have a prototype that is high fidelity, it means that it has the actual pictures, and it's called high fidelity because it's going to be as close as possible as the final product. You will have the content, the written content, you will have the pictures, you will have the animations, you will have as much as you can add to it. But all of this process starts with the most basic thing, that is wireframing. Now, before jumping into Figma, I want to show my favorite wireframing tool. Actually, I have two, and it's this. These are the basic wireframing tools. Before jumping into any software, I really recommend that you put all your ideas in paper the old school way, because then you will have a clear panorama of how to start working when you jump into Figma, and you just had to kind of copy what you already did. If you, I have well, we're going to work today, and I start wireframing here in my notebook. So when we work into Figma, I already have an idea. I'm not just jumping into it without not knowing what to do. Okay, so first of all is this. Now let's actually jump into wireframing in Figma. If you are not familiar with it, this is after you create your account, of course. This is the first screen you will see when you get your account. And as I show you, sorry, as I show you will be a bunch of things in here. If it's the first time, you will have the basic things Figma offers are kind of small examples, that for example the theme colors, the material design kit, how to wireframe, and there's another one about how to prototype, kind of like a small tutorial, let's say, or guide to start with the basics. But to create a new project, you go into here. And one thing that is very interesting is this import. If you are not familiar with Figma, but you know a little bit of, you already started working with other products for wireframing, or in general for designing UI like Sketch or like InVision or XD, then with import, you can import those files into Figma and work on them into Figma. It's very how to say, it's very easy to handle these different files. They work together very well. You can import from one to another and vice versa. Okay, so let's start with a new file. And first of all, what we need to do when start wireframing is to have in mind what we're going to do. What's the task? So in this case, for this workshop, the challenge I want us to complete is to make an A/B testing for a product page. We can think of whatever product we want, but we will need to have two different landing pages. Okay, so for the first thing you need to do is select a canvas. In Figma, there's this menu here where you can make a frame. If you make a frame here, you will see a list in here. You can have a basic square or rectangle shape, but Figma has a bunch of options. For example, if you already are working into an app, you have the option of having an iPhone 11 Pro Max, or you have an Android, or you have a Google Pixel. You have tablets, you have desktops, and in desktops you have MacBook, MacBook Pro, Surface, iMac. You have already many things that are pre-made and will make your work faster. So let's say I want to start with a MacBook, and this gives me already the size. You will see here what is the size of the MacBook regularly. So this means I'm designing my website or my landing page specifically for a MacBook resolution. And we need to have this in mind, not in this step of wireframing, but it's important to know what we are starting with when we do prototyping, because later we will need to do some adaptations when we are changing from the size of a MacBook or a MacBook Pro, or when we want to pass a website into a tablet or a phone, mobile phone format, because there's something called breaking points, and we will talk about that in the next session, that is prototyping. We need to keep that in mind all the time. So what I start doing, as I said before, wireframing is about using very simple shapes. We are not going to work today with images, pictures, or even text. Unless you have very simple text, I don't recommend to use Lorem Ipsum. If you feel comfortable about it, you can use it. For those who doesn't know what is that, I want to jump a little bit into that. Lorem Ipsum is basically simulated text, and there are plenty websites out there. If you Google Lorem Ipsum generator, you will find a couple of them, or all of them basically, and they will give you simulated text in Latin. This text doesn't mean anything. It's just kind of like the image placeholder. It's for you to know where the text is going to be, how it's going to look. The problem I found with this is that you don't really know how long it will be. You don't know how the text is going to work in the space you are embedding, because maybe you want to take two paragraphs from here, but your content writer won't write two paragraphs. So it's kind of tricky. You need to know how to work with it, or there are other options you can use instead. Well, I'm going to use both for the workshop so you can see the difference between one and another. Okay, so basically what we do here is take the basic shapes. As you can see, they are here in the menu. If you click on it, you have the rectangle, you have lines, you have arrow, and you have many different kind of shapes. And here we talk about the image placeholder, for example. But as you can see, this letter is the shortcut in your keyboard. For example, I already know, maybe not all of them, but I know the R, for example, will give me a rectangle. I know the O will give me a circle or an ellipse. And these are the figures we are going to work with. So let's start with the basics. Let's start with a menu for the landing page. If you are following me here and you want to make any questions, I will have the chat open. I will put attention to it also, so I can see if there are any questions or are going too fast or whatever comment you have. Okay, feel free to write in the chat or ask questions. Okay, so how I'm going to know for example, I want to draw a menu bar for my landing page. How am I supposed to know how big it's going to be? If you see in here, if I select my canvas, I'll erase this. I have this information here. This W is for the width, and this is the height of my whole canvas. This is my screen for my MacBook, as I selected before. So if I want my menu bar to be the size of my whole screen, then I go here and I see, okay, this is 708, and this I can copy and put the same width to my menu bar, and it will use all the size. You see, these red lines are very useful for aligning content into my frame. When you have a little bit more experience, you already know certain standards for things like, for example, this menu. So I'm going to, it depends on what you're going to put there. If you're going to put, for example, plain text, just this kind of classic HTML buttons that are just text, or you are going to put in there things like bigger buttons, or maybe a profile picture, kind of what Instagram has here in the corner, things like this, then are certain sizes that are better for things or another. So I want to use a profile picture, so I'm going to give a little bit more space to it. And as you see, I have here, this is in these red dots I have on the sides. On the sides of my menu bar, I can see how much space I'm leaving here, okay? Because it's a menu bar, I will put it just on the top and fix in the corners. So after this, we can start building. For example, let's say I will jump to the next step instead of putting here the buttons, but let's say it's a product page, so I want to have a picture in here. As you can see, there's no way to control the size of this, let's say in a free way. If I want to do a really perfect square, I need to click the shift on my keyboard, or I can just draw whatever here and control it from here. Let's say I want 200 by 200, and then I have a perfect square. Maybe it's too little, so let's change it to 300 by 300, and there it is. It's a little bit bigger. Now, I know I said wireframing is like the basic step, and some people are not really taking care of certain aspects, like for example, the space between here and here. But there's a way you can measure in here to have certain rules and margins around it. For example, let's say, okay, I'll skip this part to not go so much into detail. But what if I want this blank space to be the same as here? So I can just call the rules and measure this space and measure this space. For example, I have these visual supports. You will see these blue lines that I have here. This will help me measure this space, for example. Okay, now these shapes, I can control not only the size, I can control also the position they have. This is relative to my main frame. This number means this is 29 pixels on the x-axis in relation to this, to my main frame. And I can control other things like the rotation. Let's say if I put 90 degrees here, because, okay, it's a square, so you don't really see it, but let's put 45 degrees. You see, I rotate this shape from here. And here, there's something called border radius. What you control in here is the corners of my shape. This is a perfect square. But for example, something that is very popular nowadays, let's create a small button just for example. Let's say I want this to be my call to action button. Let's call it buy now when I'm going to create my product page. I have this button. What I want to do is to do the classic button that is round shaped, that looks kind of like a pill. How do I do that? In here, I can add the border radius. All these numbers are pixels. So let's say I want to have border radius of 10 pixels. If you watch my shape closely, you will see this is now round shaped, and I can keep adding until I have this shape I want to achieve, like this. This is my button, my call to action already. Now, with this tool, I'm managing the four sides of it. What if I just want to have one of these rounded and the rest I want to have square, like 90 degrees angles? Then I have these two. If I click in here, I will see 4 points, 4 zeros. This means the four corners of my shape are perfect angles, but I can affect them. This is working clockwise. This means it's going to be in the line I have in here, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's say I just want to affect this corner and I want to affect this one. So then I go here and I say, okay, in here I want 20 pixel border and also in this one, 20 pixel corner. And I made another shape that is not the classic rounded rectangle and is not the plain square rectangle. I made this kind of mix, controlling from here. Okay, other things I can do in here is these constraints. This will be more useful for the prototyping and is very useful when you start doing certain animations. Now I'm not going to go deeper into this because we're not going to use it right now. But this is very important. For example, you have this fixed position when scrolling. This means if I have a longer page, for example, this is my basic screen, but I can also adjust it. So I have a longer screen. I can just click my shape, fixed position when scrolling, and then when I see this working on, this will stay in place. We have a play button in here. This will show me my canvas, my frame, in a new tab, and then I can interact with it. And because I put this as fixed, you can see it's not moving, it's staying there. And I can do my page as long as I want, and it will still remain in here. What is this useful for? For example, for this. So these constraints is important for here because, for example, let's say I want to keep my menu fixed in this position even if I'm scrolling. But this means I need to constrain it to the top. This is the basic default constraint it gives you. So let's use fixed position. Use the play button. It will update every time you make changes into your frames. And then I have it here. Let's imagine I already have some buttons here or some text in here, some links. And you can see I'm scrolling, but my menu remains in here. For the wireframing, this is not really a thing. It's more for prototyping, but I thought it was important to mention. Okay, so let's continue to the prototyping. Let's put this back into the shape I want. Now, about the text, what I wanted to show is there are two ways I can use the text. I can select text in here, and I can build a box, and this will be the field where my text will be embedded. It means my text won't go out of this box. I'm going to copy this big chunk of text just to show, and I can change the size of my text in here. For example, let's put a really big size. Let's put 72. And because I set the margin until here, then all my text is displayed down. It's important to see here that because my frame only gets until here, then my text is cropped. There's also a way when you can tell Figma, don't crop whatever goes out, whatever overflows of my frame. There's also a way to do it. I don't recommend it. I recommend to have it this way because you will be aware what is getting outside of the frame. Because if not, it could happen that you have certain elements out and you will be aware of that. So when you render your design in the end, then something will be missing there without you noticing. Okay, let's put this smaller again. The other way to put text is I just put this and click in certain place, and I start putting my text. I will copy the lorem ipsum I have already. And as you can see, it's exactly the same text, but they are displayed in different ways. In the first case, I told the text what space to occupy, what I'm expecting of it. In here is completely in an horizontal way. If it happens to be like this, you will see all this text is overflowing. I can adjust this manually by taking my text box and adjusting it. But the truth is, there's not really use into doing that. It's better always what I recommend, unless you have very short lines of text. Like for example, if I want to write, let's say, a title for this, my product, which I know is not going to be a big line of text, then it's okay if I use it freely. If it's a paragraph, I recommend to draw the box. So again, I'm going through this just to show I can take the text from here, or I can just press T and automatically will change to text. If I select any of these and after I hit escape in my keyboard, it will take me back from here. And in here, I can select all of my elements in my canvas. But with this hand, for example, I can move around in case, let's say, I have many pages and I want to review them. Or if my page is very long, then I can scroll down to see what I have below. And again, escape will take me to the selection tool. Okay, so let's continue with the prototyping. I think this is a lot of text. So to edit text, if you are familiar already with certain design programs, software like Illustrator or Photoshop, is pretty much the same. It's very universal, even from Microsoft Word. Like the align, I can have it in the center. Now, this center is very important to consider. It's not the center of my document. You see, I'm clicking this and nothing happens. Why? Because this is relative to my text box, not my document. For example, I will grab this and make my box longer. And here is in the center. Here's to the right, here's to the left. Doesn't matter my canvas, matters the text box that I have in here. So let's make a title for this. And let's put some text in here. I'm going to show the two ways that we can put text. One is copying the lorem ipsum. This is an example, but you can generate in here. There's an option to make new one, and you can control how many paragraphs you want, how many characters you want, different styles in different languages. For example, in Latin, numbers and letters. You can have, for example, I have in here in Spanish is the language I normally work on besides English. But there are a few options. If you see in here, the changes I made for this text remain to the second one because Figma is assuming I'm just making this block of text in the same style. So I can edit my text in different fonts and different weights and all these things we can usually manage as text blocks in other text editing programs. And the other way that you can use to simulate text is using shapes. What I mean with this, I can achieve this same thing. Let's start with the A/B testing. I can take my frame and just Control-C, Control-V, and it will give me an exact copy of it. Another way that you can use is just using, again, the shapes. I don't have the title of my product, and I'm not going to use simulated text. I just want to put a placeholder. So this is another way. And I don't know how big my next text is going to be. So I just want to put limits to it. This is going to be my text box. I know it's going to be a short paragraph, so I just can use certain lines instead of drawing the whole box. These red squares with the numbers is telling me what's the space between these. It's very helpful because it's very important to keep the balance between the spaces. Let's say I'm trying to simulate here text, it will look weird if I do this, for example, or let's put it closer. This doesn't really look like a text that is more organized like this. And this in general works very good for margins between, let's say, my text and the button I have here. And there are also these guides to align. Let's say I want to align my text to the center of my picture here. How do I do this? I just need to scroll, and in here is free movement. If I took my same elements, but as I drag them around, I select down the Shift key, then it will show me these guides. This here is aligned with the center of my picture, or I can align with the top of my picture, or I can align my elements with the bottom of my picture. I can align this button with the margin of my text. I can align this with my title, for example, and there is a line. Why? Because it's very important to have these margins when we start designing. It will be more important when prototyping. Wireframing, you don't have to go that deep into details. Of course, it's important if you start adding details. But in the first stage, usually it's kind of messy and dirty. For example, if you are working in sprints, if you don't know what is a sprint, I really recommend you to check on it. But sprint basically is there is one moment of this process where you do wireframing, and you have to do a lot of wireframings in a very small amount of time, a very short amount of time. So there's no time to go into details. So you usually work very messy, and on top of that, you create more and more and more and more things, more and more options. And of those options, you select the ones that you're going to work with. And then you go into details and clean it up a little bit. So let's say in wireframing, it's kind of allowed in certain moments to be messy and dirty in your work. You don't have to be neat while wireframing all the time, at least. There are moments to be more creative and just let it flow. Okay, so other things I can do for wireframing is not only draw the shapes I already used. Let's say I want to take one of these things that I have pre-made. For example, I want to take this navigation bar. As you can see, I can drag the whole element, or if I go here and I open, I will see all the elements, and if you look into the screen, it will highlight all the elements as I pass through them, in case that you want to select one. Let's say I want to get rid of this one. Okay, or I can take this as a whole, is what I'm going to do, and replace this instead of my menu bar that is pretty simple and doesn't really has anything. Now, as you can see, this says navigation B because this is a canvas of its own. In Figma, a canvas will have this pound sign and this drop down menu showing what it contains. But I can just close the drop down and look at the canvas I have. I can rename them instead of navigation B because this can be confusing. I will call it navigation or navigation menu, for example. And this is a canvas of its own, and I can work with it separately and create an instance of it and put it here. That is also one way to go, or the other one is just create a copy of it, and you can place a frame or canvas inside another one. For example, in here already, here is just on top, but I'm going to drag it inside, and there is inside. Okay, so now I'm going to resize this. To resize, you go to the corner, shift key, and there it is. And as you see, it made a mess. Why? Because as I said, this is a canvas of their own. It's not the same reshaping a whole canvas or frame than reshaping my my figure, my rectangle in here, for example. There are certain rules or kind of rules, let's say, that are pre-made in here. The designers that made this already give it a certain size, already give a certain distance between this, and if I just try to copy it and resize it freely, then I'm breaking these rules, and that's why it's a kind of messy in here. That's one. And the other one is because this really is not meant to be used as it is. It's just an example, so I can replace, for example, this picture I have in here. This is a text, for example, this is a vector image, for example. All in here is made to be replaced. The text also, I can write over it. All this pre-made stuff is for me to make my own. Let's say I don't want all these buttons. I want to simplify things, or I have less pages in my A/B testing. Instead of this register button, let's say I want to have a profile picture here. So what I can do is redraw and start working with this. When we go to prototyping, we're going to talk about symbols. What it means that I can make this a symbol. For example, a navigation bar is usually made a symbol because we are copying the same information, the same frame over and over and over and over in all my frames. For example, if I have a flow of 5 pages, I don't need to copy this pre-made navigation bar 5 times. I will do it 1 time, set it up, made it into a symbol, and then I copy this symbol into the rest of my pages. And every time I change the symbol, the 5 that I copy are going to be changed again. So I don't need to change the same thing. Let's say I want to delete this text. I don't need to do it 5 times. I just do it 1 time and automatically will be changing the rest of them. It's very useful for prototyping later on. Okay, something else I wanted to show. Let's say get rid of this and clean up a little bit. Something else I wanted to show here in the pre-made stuff is that there's a difference between, for example, this image holder and my regular shapes. Okay, for this pre-made, and also works in here, but I have less elements, so I want to show in here. If I click here, as you can see, it's a canvas of its own. I can see because it has a name, and here has the pound symbol. And if I want a specific element, I can go through the list in here. This body E has all the elements, and they are highlighted when I pass through them, when I hover with my mouse over them. And I can select them here. Or for me, it's simpler if I click, and every time I do double click on them, I go to a deeper level. For example, I select in here and select the whole frame. I select and go to this one. And in here, I select my rectangle only. I went into a deeper level into my frames. And I can go deeper and deeper. For example, in here is my frame, and here I have select my text. And from my text, I want to select just this block. And from here, I want to select just this part of the text, not all of it. So I can go deeper and deeper into the levels of a frame by these 2 ways, by clicking or by coming into here to where my levels are shown. Sorry, I need a little bit of water. Okay, so about what I want to talk about is the image placeholders. Why is useful to make the difference between image placeholders and simple shapes? For example, works better when I have these cross lines here, this is kind of a universal standard that there's an image that goes in there. For some prototyping tools, when you have this kind of shape, automatically you can click here and they will open a menu so you can import an image. That doesn't happen with a regular shape. So it's more about, let's say, the design standards. Let's put here the way I wanted to show my picture, 300 by 300. Now, another thing that is different between image placeholders and the shapes is the shape. Another way I can affect it is if I double click on it. You see these lines, this means I can play with the vectors of a shape. This only happens with shapes. For example, I cannot play like this with the text box, for example. I can just change the size, but because it's a text box, a text input, I cannot really play with the vectors that are surrounding here. Unless I turn this text into vectors, and I can play with every node of the letters. Kind of a similar thing we have in Illustrator. Why is this important? Maybe it's not really useful when you already have this simple square, but there's another tool that is for drawing shapes. Let's go back to my canvas. Let's say I want to have a weird banner here that I'm going to use drawing by hand. You just need to put, similar to Illustrator or Photoshop, point A, point B, and it will start creating the shape. And you can also do curves in here. Let's say this is going to be my banner. One time I built a website that had a banner with a similar shape. Actually, originally the image was not this shape. This was a square and it has like a place that was white, but looked like this. So in the wireframe, it needed to look like this, for example. So again, I have my shape in here. I can change in here. Instead of having the stroke, I want to have a fill. Why here I have. In here, because I have more nodes and more points of the vector that I created, in here I just have the 4 corners. In here I have more because I created this. I can play more with this shape. And because I have this Bezier curve, I can play with it also. This, I like how this looks. Okay, so let's say in my A/B testing, I'm going to have my text, my picture, and I want to have a small gallery in here of pictures. It's going to be, let's say, 300. I'll do 100 by 100. And I have my gallery. In here, when you copy and paste, Figma automatically gives it to you on top of the figure. And you can drag it 2 ways freely as you want. And the other one is holding down Shift, and it will give you As you can see, I'm pulling in here my mouse down, but it's just working in vertical or horizontal lines. It's not letting me do this. And this is very useful when you want to stack things like in here, for example. And let's set this into the same margin. And this is my gallery. Now, as I said before, it's not only wireframing, it's not only for creating structures. Let's say I have this small gallery of my products, there's a structure for this and maybe for the text, and I kind of create already a call to action in here. Let's put this in here. It also works for doing A/B testing. So what I can do to make it very clear that what I'm trying to do, let's say this is not going to be picture, this is going to be a video. Let's take what we have already printed here, just to take the play button. And let's resize it a little bit for 100. In the center of the square. What is important to do when you are doing an A/B testing, like in this case, what I like to do at least, is to leave comments on what I'm changing. Here we have a tool for doing exactly that. So let's say test A, product gallery. And in here I can say test B, product video. Now, if I'm working with a team, let's say more designers or developers, it would be very useful for them to see my comments after, because they will know what I'm changing in my page, in my overall, and they also can create comments or add comments down of my own. So they will say, okay, how you did this, or I don't know, things like, why don't you make a third test instead of gallery or video, just put animation, let's say GIF, for example. Okay. Now, I want to start wrapping up with this to show a little bit more of the tools. Other thing we can use, for example, is bring vector shapes out from the Figma library and other libraries, for example, icons. I use this a lot. I have, for example, this is pretty standard gallery for icons. It's called Font Awesome. I have the free ones ready in here, and I have already the ones that I used. So this is my gallery of icons. And what I can do is simply drop them inside. Let's say I want to create a list with this kind of icons. Or let's look into something more interesting. For example, let's say, okay, let's not get over complicated and use the copyright. Yes, this is a good one. Okay, I just drop my SVG file into Figma, and I can edit it also. I can change the color to match, for example, the gray I already have in the rest of my document. I can also resize 200 by 200. In here, I have this link. So this, when I push this, it means it will do in proportion. For example, because I have here a square, if I change here to 600, the other side will do also. Let's say this one, I have 150 by 50, but let's say I want to grow this to the double of the size. I just need to write in this side and automatically will do the other one. The thing here is that doesn't work with the border radius. This I need to write it down again because it's not really linked to this size. Okay, so the basic elements I use for wireframing are pre-made stuff like this navigation bar I have here that I took from Figma. And if you look out there, there are plenty of pre-made templates already for wireframing on Figma and Sketch and InVision on these kind of tools, and basically work for the three of them. So we have pre-made stuff. We have text that is called rich text, and it's called rich text because I can just not have plain text but play with it. Let's say I want to do this into bold, so I enrich my text. That's why it's called like that. I have shapes that I can play with, not only with the size and position but also with the angle and the border radius, and also as I played in here with the nodes. And I have objects I can bring from other libraries outside, like the icons I use here. It also works with images. I can just drag and drop, but in wireframing, usually these are the elements you are using frequently. I can also create, and this will be very useful later when we start creating the prototype and we start creating a small guide to build our design system. I can, for example, I want to keep this specific color of gray, then I can just keep it and give it a name. Let's say primary gray. And every time I want to use it, I will have it here. This is my primary gray. I can make a small library of colors. So when I'm working in my wireframing, I can have already, for example, a distinction of what are my call to actions, my CTA. Let's copy this blue in here. And I want to say, I want to save it. I have it here already. Let's say all my call to action buttons are going to be in the same shade of blue that I already have. So I can keep this in my library already. And for all my icons, I can use a different shade of gray. Let's use a darker one. This is one I really used a lot, for example. So in my wireframing, I already know which are just placeholders, like this video placeholder, which are meant to be clicked on, like my button here, like the play button in this video, and which are other information. For example, my text in here is black, or my icons in here are in a darker gray. Okay, so this is basically what you can do in wireframing. Now, to wrap up, I'm going to finish I'm going to delete this canvas. And when I do this, when I delete the frame, the canvas, it also gets rid of everything that is inside it. I can select just one element, or I can make just everything disappear together. Okay, so now that I'm creating this structure, let's shorten this a little bit back to normal. 700. My page. And I want to have here my CTA. Maybe I will add a little bit more of border radius to have it more rounded and nicer. I want to align it with here. And in here, I want to put some information. When wireframing, it's very important to have certain information that is into the user experience. Maybe I don't have the text, so I'm using simulated text. I don't have my actual content. But for example, I consider in here, if I'm selling t-shirts, then I need a few things I want to put in here. For example, I need a drop-down button for the size and another one for the color. Or maybe for the colors, I have these small circles representing the color options available. And I can choose a color from there. So this is for a medium size shirt. This is my drop-down menu, and I want to represent that these are different colors. But because I am wireframing, doesn't matter really that I have the exact colors that are going to be in my prototype. And let's say I want to add here some reviews. For reviews, Figma already has this start shape. It's not the only thing you can use it for, but it's the main one that is used for. Let's give it a size of 20 pixels. So I can simulate a 5-star review here. And I will have my structure if I want to achieve. And I need in here, let's say, another profile picture of who gave the review. And because I'm not going to use simulate text here, I will use the other option that I had, that is, I will create a title with a shape. And I will just create the rest of the text. Position. Oh, sorry. This one, the one I want to fix. Now, it's very important to, I'm going to raise this to not make confusion. This is all the elements on my frame. It's very important to be organized with what you are designing. For example, I have these 3 image placeholders. I can do on a right click or Command G, Control G, and group selection, and it will create me this group, and I can say this is my image gallery. It will show me all the elements it has in here, and if I make groups, then I can start working in a cleaner way and more organized to know where are all my elements. For example, I have here the review, but let's say I have a few more. For example, in here, this piece of the review I created is overflow. I will fix this, and I have this. Just look how many elements are in my canvas just for the reviews, just for these 3 reviews and wireframing here. But if I create a group and it's just reviews, then I'm working in a cleaner way. If I want to take a specific element, then I go here. Let's say I want to simulate that this guy didn't like so much my product, so only gave 3 stars. And I go into it, I open the drop down, and then when I finish, I close it again, and it's cleaner the way I work. And every time I hover over them, it will highlight in here. For example, I'm in my title that it says awesome jacket. In here, because I group already showing me all the group, and then I can drop down and go to specific parts of my group. And I'm working in a clearer way also. And this is it. It's not the most complex wireframe design, but it's basically to show you how to wireframe, what are the tools you can use for wireframing, and what are the some tricks, let's say, like the one about the border radius and the shapes, and these kind of things about how to simulate text both ways using lorem ipsum or using just spaces on where the paragraphs are supposed to go, and kind of like in a general view of what is wireframing. I'm missing here one very important part I deleted before. I'm not going to go to all the details, but just to know more or less what's going on here. Okay, so if there are any questions, any comments you want to know, maybe I went a little bit too fast, I hope not. But feel free to write in the chat or ask directly.
Thank you for the presentation. I did have a question. I came in a little late, so maybe you touched it already. But when we use this white space for the wireframing and stuff, is it transferable to other databases?
You mean it's transparent when you export?
Yeah, are you able to export the data to another host?
You are able to export this data, and it depends on how you save it. If you save it to have the transparency and you don't set your frame or your canvas into specific color, for example, I have it here already on white, but I can make it to be transparent, and I export like this. If I want to make a PNG, for example, it's possible to make it like this. But yeah, it's possible both ways. It depends on what you want. For wireframing, it's recommendable that you use it this way. It's more in prototyping when you use transparencies.
Thank you. Can we use this? Before this presentation, I wasn't familiar with Figma. Are we able to use that site to host a website?
Sorry, I didn't hear you very well because there was some noise in your microphone. Can you?
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So I was wondering if we're able to use Figma to host us a website from Figma?
To host, no. Figma is basically for designing the prototype. For hosting, there are other tools where you are able to design and they will build it. It's this famous, very on trend, no code options. Figma is more focused specifically on UX UI design, and they are kind of assuming you are working with a developing team. But if you want to host, let's say, to design a page very easily with these elements that I show, and that also be hosted in the same platform, there are other options. If you want, I will write it down, but it's basically the most famous one is called Webflow, and there's another one that it's basically the same thing, but I can't remember now, but it's this. Any other questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, thank you, Aldo, for your presentation. It was amazing.
It was a pleasure.
Webflow is for prototype, or it's just to make your website without code, I guess, right?
Yes, Webflow is not for prototyping, it's for making a website without code. But I've seen some people use it like to people that is not familiar, for example, with Figma or with Sketch or these tools, because Webflow is very easy to use. I've seen some people use it like to have a vague idea of what they want to show to an actual designer. But yeah, it's not the tool for this.
Okay, so what's the difference between Figma and XD? Like,
the truth is not much. All these Figma, InVision, XD, Sketch, Zeppelin are basically the same concept. Is a design tool that you use with vectors. The main difference will be, for example, the integration you have with certain tools. XD, because it belongs to Adobe, has better integrations with things like Photoshop, for example, or other images tools, for example, that belongs to the same brand or company. But besides this, there's not really big difference. There are some in the, let's say, the way you achieve certain animations, for example, for a slider gallery, you do it one way in Figma and maybe another way in XD, but you will get a similar result. It's not really a big difference, I would say.
okay, so in Figma and in XD, in both we can do like high fidelity and low fidelity.
Yes, it's correct. You can do high and low fidelity on both of them.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for it.
You're welcome. If you want tools specifically for low fidelity, specifically for wireframing, there are other options. But Figma, because it's free, is the more popular one, because the other one that I specifically use one for wireframing that is specifically for this, and it's very easy to use, and it's more focused into wireframing. But the thing is, you have to pay. You pay for it. The company I work for, they pay for this tool, so I use it. But Figma is free, so it's more popular because of this.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other question? No, seems like it was very clear. I hope.
Well, Aldo, we just want to thank you so much for doing this for us. This was a great workshop. Also, Melanie dropped some really good information in the chat. I'll just copy and paste her message again so that you all are able to see it. And I'll also drop our Instagram and website so you all are able to stay up to date on the events that we'll be hosting. And I hope that I'm able to see you all at the next workshop next Friday at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. I have a question in the chat. It says, should you prefer to do A/B testing be done at the lo-fi or hi-fi phase? It depends a lot on what's your intention on testing? Are you trying to test to final users, or are you trying to test, let's say, with the stakeholders, or are you trying to test with investors, or are you trying to test with people from your team? It's kind of depends on that. So yeah, that's it. That would be the answer. So if there are no more questions, thank you for sharing the pre-made stuff for Figma. The template, free templates are always very useful, and I want to just share. I'm making mailing list for the events I'm holding, webinars and workshops. All of them are for free. So if you want to join my mailing list, I will share here the link to do so. I promise I'm not using this for spam or whatever. It's just to invite people to these webinars or online things I'm on. And when you subscribe, I'm giving away a free template also. So it's another thing you can get.
Okay. So yeah, I have one more question. It's not
Okay.
like a prototype or wireframing, but I assume like you are UX designer, right?
Right.
Okay.
I
So
hope so.
no, okay. Yeah. So actually I'm also learning, like I'm self-taught UX designer. So I'm finding some problem like by uh, finding a problem first of all, right? For the process. Then you go for like user research and all. So
Yes.
could you make one session for something like how can you do user research, like which kind of problems are required for like qualitative or quantitative? Okay, that's really deep knowledge. Like maybe if I mean you get more candidates for that, then that would be amazing for designers like me. Those are like self learning. So in YouTube there are lots of resources, like it's so overwhelming, so you don't know which path to go. So that's a problem sometimes, like.
Yes, of course. Yeah, that's pretty challenging. And if you're switching careers or you are starting into user experience, I think it's one of the most challenging things. I will be very glad to do another session related to this. But I'm more kind of dependent on the I working with a Discord group with Melanie, the Collective Studio, or with the Rich Project. So it kind of more depends onto them. But I would be very glad to do it. And if they are willing to, I'm done with this. I'm set.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was looking for some mentor or something who can guide, like, because I have a problem. So there might be a lots of students
Yeah.
like those are seeking for help from designers. Those are really experienced persons. So I just thought we can do something.
What we can do is I don't know if a session, but I will share my my website.
Okay.
In there I have links to my social media, like my LinkedIn or my Facebook page, and you can write me in there if you have some specific questions, and I can give a few minutes to answer your questions. I'll be very glad to do so.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. Bingo. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I hope you all enjoy today this workshop. I hope to see you next Friday for prototyping this wireframing, what we did, and show you a little bit more things about Figma. And that will be it for today.
Thank you so much again. And this concludes the end of our event. You all are free to go.
Bye-bye.